23-11, and Toyota continues to dominate at Kansas Speedway with Tyler Reddick winning today. Denny Hamlin has another one that got away. Let's talk about NASCAR in the Heartland. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about NASCAR in Kansas City, where Tyler Reddick is able to get his second win of this season and punch his ticket into the next round of the NASCAR playoffs, while Denny Hamlin was definitely the class of the field all day. Unfortunately, did not get the win 2 weeks in a row. Denny Hamlin has lost a couple of races that he probably should have won, or at least he was the fastest car. We had a crazy restart at the end. Some guys stayed out on tires. Some guys got 2. Some guys got 4. We'll discuss all that. And of course, we had the playoff grid shaken up a little bit as some favorites to win the championship had issues early on in the race, and throughout the entire race, we had drivers with trouble that are in the playoffs. We'll break it all down. Let's go ahead and get into it today on the show, and let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's talk about that final restart, because Denny Hamlin, with 10 laps to go, it looked like this was going to be Denny Hamlin's race to win. He was going to pull away, get both wins in Kansas this year. Denny Hamlin had it. He was going to, redemption from last week, right? Denny Hamlin was going to come back from a tough loss last week and get the win, but with 7 laps to go, Chris Buescher in the 17 car has a tire go down. NASCAR is forced to throw the caution. They waited a little ways before they threw it, but they knew they eventually had to throw it with some debris coming out on the racetrack, and that required a restart. We had guys like Kyle Busch, Eric Jones, Joey Logano try to stay out on 2 tires. They went down pit road, got 2 tires, gained some track position. We saw where tire wear was key all day. We had Daniel Suarez in the 99 car have no tires, so he was going to be starting on the lead in the front on the top row with no new tires at all. I think he had like 40-something lap tires in the car. That obviously didn't stand a chance to get the win. He actually flew back to the 16th position, so we can take a look at the final restart here. You have Denny Hamlin, obviously Tyler Reddick on 4 tires a little bit farther back. So you have right away, once on the start, Joey Logano tries to go to the inside to make a move. You see the 99 of Daniel Suarez, that blue car, immediately falls back, doesn't have a shot. Eric Jones, Logano going for it. Kyle Busch did not have a lot of speed there at the end, at least winning speed. He was able to hold off, finish in the 7th position, but was unable to challenge for the victory. And Kyle Busch was probably a top 10 car all day, but definitely not a winning race car throughout the day. And then at the end, Denny Hamlin tried to make a charge to get by Tyler Reddick at the very end, but Tyler Reddick was able to hold off Denny Hamlin, get past everybody that was in front of him on older tires, and get the win. So definitely a very professional and talented run by Tyler Reddick there. It was exciting to see what he was able to do at the end of the race in a clutch moment to get a win at Kansas Speedway. And I mentioned earlier that 23-11 has dominated this racetrack. Well, you go back to the first race in the next-gen car at Kansas, Kurt Busch won in the 45 car. You go to the second race at Kansas last fall, a year ago, Bubba Wallace wins in the 45 car. You have the spring this year, Denny Hamlin wins, who is the owner of the 45 car and the 23 car. And then today, the 45 car with Tyler Reddick has won at Kansas. So this is 23-11 and his owner's racetrack for sure. So the 45 cars won 3 of the last 4 races at Kansas with 3 different drivers, which is a really interesting statistic to look at for sure with those Toyotas. Those Toyotas have shown a ton of speed at the 1.5 miles all season long, especially Kansas Speedway over the last 2 years since we've moved to this new car. So let's kind of go through the finishing results. I showed you the restart. Let's kind of go through where everybody finished. I mentioned Daniel Suarez actually went all the way back to 16th. Tyler Reddick was able to obviously get the win, a great clutch win for him. Like I said, a very talented performance. Puts him into the next round of the playoffs, which is important, right? And also gives him five bonus points per round of the playoffs that he makes it to. Denny Hamlin, a second place finish, another heartbreaking second place finish for him, led a majority of the race. Kyle Larson was really fast early on, but Denny Hamlin emerged as the guy to beat on that final run, was able to get by a couple of guys and hold off a couple of guys and then pull away for, I want to say it was a 60-something lap run at the end of this race, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, but Denny Hamlin was obviously the one to beat. That caution coming out completely ruined his day. That's 2 weeks in a row that Denny Hamlin has not been able to win. Once again, his attitude's okay. He's not super frustrated. He's staying calm. He's looking at the positives. They have speed. They've been the fastest car 2 weeks in a row in the NASCAR Cup Series. So Denny Hamlin, I sort of like his attitude. I think that could be a dangerous Denny Hamlin if he's able to keep that attitude throughout the entire playoffs, and definitely he's trying to win his first championships. 50-something wins for Denny Hamlin, 50 wins and no championships. Definitely he wants to go out there and get that first one. Eric Jones in the third position. Eric Jones was definitely not a third-place car all day, but Jones was in the top 10 a majority of the day, was in the top 10 last week, finished in the top 10 last week. I'm really excited to see what this 43 team can do for the rest of this season and going into next season, because they're switching over to Toyota next year. We know they've lost some funding from Chevrolet for this year. Now Eric Jones isn't in the playoffs, but I still think it's a big headline because Eric Jones, super talented driver, right? Definitely one of Toyota's development drivers back in the day for Kyle Busch. And then unfortunately, obviously switched over to Chevrolet, is now going back to Toyota next year. How dangerous can Eric Jones be? Talented race car driver, now experienced race car driver. His rookie season was 2017, has experience in many different race cars with Toyota in the NASCAR Cup Series. Obviously, the 2 years of experience with the next gen car. What can Eric Jones do next year? We're starting to see the results from the crew, from the team. I believe the other race car for Legacy Motor Club finished 19 today with a driver making his third start, Carson Hocevar. So it's going to be exciting what this team can do in a year from now with Nemechek coming over and, of course, Eric Jones as Toyota drivers. I'm excited to see what that Legacy Motor Club team can do. Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson was another one of those drivers. I talked about how Denny Hamlin was really the class of the field, but Kyle Larson at the very start of the race, it was kind of split in two. You had the first half of the race, Kyle Larson was dominant and run into some issues where he didn't come down pit road, and that cost him a lot. He didn't want to go down pit road and lose track position. That cost him a ton. He was running way slower lap times than everybody else and lost a ton of position, fell well outside of the top 15, was able to come all the way back up from that mishap and get all the way back up. Also, he got loose on that restart where he lost a lot of position as well. Not just from the tires. He got sideways for a little bit there, saved it, and unfortunately Kyle Larson finishes fourth today with a race car that at least had a chance to go battle with Denny Hamlin and Tyler Reddick at the end. He was Superman until that issue happened in the middle of the race, and they were obviously very upset about it. Joey Logano, that was one of those drivers that stayed out on two tires in this race, so Joey Logano was probably going to be outside the top 10 regardless. Once again, he's trying to make up points for the playoffs, and fortunately for him, was able to hold off the other guys behind him and get a solid top 5 finish for Joey Logano in the 22 car. Chase Elliott, who showed a lot of speed, actually led at one point, was able to get by Kyle Larson at one point in this race. Things unfortunately just didn't quite work out for him in the later stage of the race, but a 6th place finish for Chase Elliott, edging out 7th place Kyle Busch. Here's the thing I want to say about Kyle Busch. I'm glad he was able to regroup, get up front, finish in the top 7 today, finish in the top 10, a 7th place finish, and 11th last week. Gets him some decent points in the playoffs. He's now 24 points above the cut line. But Kyle Busch has got to start executing the weekends a little bit better. Starting in the back puts you in positions you don't want to be. What if Kyle Busch had started in the top 10? Could he have had a better run? Could he have had a chance to go for the win? We don't know, because you spend more time trying to come back from your mishap, at least early on in the race, in this race particularly. So Kyle Busch got to clean up practice and qualifying sessions that are now probably more important than they've been in a really long time. So I hope to see Kyle Busch show some more speed moving forward. He has decent speed. He hasn't had winning speed really since the early summer portion, but he has good enough speed to continue to get points, to finish in the top 10. It's more about executing the weekend for Kyle Busch. And fortunately for him, it worked out kind of last week with an 11th place, and worked out, I'd say, pretty good today, finishing 7th, which is probably where he should have finished on speed alone. Christopher Bell obviously finishing in the 8th position today, qualified on pole. He's qualified on pole, I believe, the first 2 races of the playoffs, but has lost a little bit of track position, had some problems last week, but was able to somewhat execute better today. 8th place finish for Christopher Bell. Brad Keselowski running up front all day long, was able to stay in the top 10, finishing in the 9th position. Then Alex Bowman, a non-playoff driver, was able to finish a solid top 10 day for Alex Bowman, who's been getting some top 10s all season, but had a rough stretch in the middle of the year, but finally finishing in the top 10 once again. So with that being said, let's pull up the playoff grid and take a look at it. You have Kyle Larson now, Tyler Reddick, both with wins this round, so they are guaranteed into the next round of the NASCAR playoffs. Denny Hamlin, with the amount of stage points he earned last week at Darlington and this week in Kansas, he is now 49 points above the cut line. Denny Hamlin, he's not mathematically safe. I think it's going to be a disaster next week that would take him out. I don't see a situation where Denny Hamlin gets out. It's going to have to be guys that are below him that have a really great week, and he's going to have to wreck at the very beginning, get no stage points. I don't see that happening. I think Denny Hamlin's going to the next round. Same thing with William Byron. All the bonus points he was able to rack up during the season. I see Denny Hamlin, William Byron making it in. Brad Keselowski a little bit closer, but he still has a decent cushion, just has to go in there and race somewhat clean. Just don't wreck yourself out early, and I think Keselowski's safe. Ryan Blaney gave up a lot of points today on pit stops. That was another thing I wanted to talk about, was not executing very well on pit road at all. That's definitely something they need to look forward to. It's been a season-long problem for Ryan Blaney with those pit stops, but it was really a problem today, and it's cost him a lot of points this year and a lot of points in this round of the playoffs. He's still 25 to the good, which is great, but you never know what can happen when you go to a racetrack like Bristol, and we see every time at Bristol how it comes down to 1 or 2 points at the end of these races. Kyle Busch, 24 points above the cut line, a solid, decent cushion, but that's nothing to play around with. You cannot be content with that. You have to go into Bristol trying to get stage points. Qualify and practice well for Kyle Busch and have a decent day and finish in the top, because you can lose that many points and lose your spot into the next round. Definitely want to watch that. Ross Chastain, 18 points above. That's definitely a little bit closer. Chris Buescher with the problem at the end of the race today with that flat tire really dampened his season, because that's going to put him only 13 points above. But Chris Buescher did win at the race in Bristol, the night race in Bristol a year ago, so I want to keep an eye on him. Just needs to get to the end of that race, has a shot to go for the win. I would hate to see Chris Buescher, who's had so much speed in the late stages of the regular season, have a first-round exit, so hopefully he's able to get through it. Christopher Bell, once again, was able to somewhat execute today, gained on his points lead a little bit over the cut line, 13 points above. Logano, only 12 points above your defending Cup champion. That's not safe at all. You can lose that after the first stage. Kevin Harvick is able to finish 7 points above the cut line. Unfortunately for Harvick, that's a couple of weeks where he's had a lot of speed. I go back to last week with the pit road incident. That gave up a ton of points for Kevin Harvick. He's had speed today, just things didn't play out right with strategy for him once again. Hopefully Kevin Harvick is able to make it in. 7 points above right now, so it's really close for Kevin Harvick. And now you take a look in the guys in red that had disastrous days today below the cut line. And Martin Truex Jr., arguably the championship favorite all season long, is 7 points below the cut line in round number 1 after having a right rear tire go out on lap 4 in this race. Had no opportunity to get stage points, had no opportunity to get a decent finish. Gets 1 point on the day, finishing dead last. That is a terrible, disastrous day for Martin Truex Jr. We go to Bristol next week. He's not been strong at Bristol in his past. Bristol can be crazy. If something minor goes wrong at Bristol, that can be disastrous where it wouldn't be at other racetracks. I'm nervous for Martin Truex Jr. right now because he's had the speed, except for last week. You go back to Darlington, wasn't really fast last week, but had the speed today, at least all weekend long. Just had that tire go out. It would be so unfortunate for Truex to miss the next round of the playoffs due to a flat tire at Kansas, but it's very possible right now looking at the point situation. Truex has got to capitalize next week. You've got to try to get as many stage points as possible in case something does go wrong at Bristol, which it does for a lot of drivers at that racetrack. We see mechanical failures all the time at that tough, tricky, high banks at Bristol. And of course, 7 points below, not safe at all right now. We'll have to see what Martin Truex Jr. can do to try to stay into the playoffs and make it with his 15 bonus points per round, with his other bonus points from winning races and stages all year long. All of those go away if he doesn't make it. If he does make it, he gets to carry those over into round 2. So we're going to have to watch him. Bubba Wallace was running in the top 2. Looked like he had a good chance to go out there and win the race. I talked about how 2311 has been fast at this racetrack since the Next Gen era began, really since the 2311 era began. Bubba Wallace unfortunately had a tire go down, slammed the wall. Some issues with the toe link happened, the rear toe link. After that incident, Bubba Wallace unfortunately finished in the back today, 19 points below the cut line. It's going to be tough for him to try to get above the cut line. He can do it with points. He can go out there, get some stage points, get a good finish. He might be able to capitalize on some others' mistakes because Bristol is just that crazy in many situations. But if you're Bubba Wallace, I think you want to go out there, maximize stage points, and then start going and thinking about the race win. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 22 points below the cut line today. An issue early on, was slow all day long. Unfortunately, did not have a good day today at all. Had a decent week last week, but is unable to back it up today, and just not enough playoff bonus points going into this round. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is now 22 below the cut line. And Michael McDowell, trying to make a strategy move at the end of the race to gain position. It didn't work out at all. Super risky. They didn't have speed in the 34 car today. Now 40 points below the cut line. It might not say must win on here, but I probably should have put -1 win because Michael McDowell has to go into next week with the idea that he has to go in there and win because there's probably not going to be any way he can make it without winning at Bristol. It is a possibility that he gets it done. We'll have to continue to watch it. We'll have to see if Michael McDowell is able to go out there and get the win. But unfortunately for him, I think his playoffs might be coming to an early end here following the first round of the playoffs. So that's it. That's really all there is to talk about after what I thought was a really solid Kansas race. A lot of comers and goes throughout the day, like I mentioned. Some playoff trouble for a lot of playoff drivers, some trouble for some non-playoff drivers. It was an interesting race. It was a fun race to watch at Kansas, 267 laps. And, of course, I do like the finish at the end. There was no big wreck, but it was still hardcore racing on a restart at the end of the race. It was a lot of fun to watch. I enjoyed this race. Next week, next Saturday night, we go to the Bristol under the lights for the cutoff race to get into the second round of the playoffs. It's going to be exciting. It should be interesting to see. I think track position will be key, so pay attention to practice, pay attention to qualifying, because that's going to determine who has a good chance to go out there and have a decent day. But that's it. That's all there is to talk about. Like and subscribe if you like the video. Please share the video if you do. I do appreciate it. And, of course, about Kyle Busch finishing 7th, let's get rowdy.